What's good, folks? How's everybody doing? New setup today. Just got back from my trip to Chicago and got a little equipment, so we're set up, a little more organized, a little Stefan Molyneux-esque, I know, with the white background and such. But today we're talking about regulating big tech. Why it's time to think like Teddy Roosevelt and actually regulate these major industries. So today, if you haven't been following the news at all, you'll have seen that Alex Jones and Infowars were banned within 12 hours from Facebook, Google, YouTube, Spotify, and what else? There was a fourth one, Apple, their podcasts. And as a result, we are now, Alex is doing like a 24-hour thing. And so as a preface, I'm not a big fan of Alex Jones. I never have been. If you've been a regular viewer of my Periscopes, you'll know that I'm not a huge fan. But I think that's beside the point. I think the big thing that really is remarkable today is it's not just that he was banned, but how he was banned. He was banned by 4 different unbelievably powerful companies within the span of 12 hours, indicating that they're at least, if not aggressively colluding, like talking to one another about whether or not he should be banned, then they're working in concert. And when you think about it, just the sheer market cap, the size of these companies is enormous, right? Apple is a $1 trillion company, the first ever $1 trillion company. Google is $850 billion. Facebook is $500 billion, and Spotify bringing up the rear at a mere $32 billion market cap. That's a combined net worth of about $2.4 trillion. There are only 7 countries in the world with a GDP greater than the combined market cap of the 4 companies that just work together. Moreover, think about what that means. It's different, I think, from one company deciding that they've had enough of you. 4 companies working in concert. They're effectively deleting him from the internet. And I couldn't help think that the big insight I had was that was an exercise of sovereign power. Can you think of another exercise of sovereign power that is similar in magnitude? Right? Like, that's almost the death penalty for a company. And it's administered jointly by these 4 separate companies, which effectively make up a sovereign power. They are acting like a sovereign. And the problem with their particular exercise of sovereignty is that they're not doing so in a way that is consistent and orderly, right? Jared Holt messaged me. He said, and he actually had, at a reasonable point. Like, I made the point about the market cap of these various companies, and Jared Holt messaged me, and he responded. He said, Will, isn't this consistent with the conservative desire to see guidelines consistently applied? And I said, not necessarily, right? Like, this is actually not evidence because it's one instance, right? To judge whether or not there is consistent application of a rule, you don't look at a single moment. You don't look at a single instance. You say, are you looking at every single one of the potential companies that could be banned or pages that could be banned? Is there consistency across them? And Breitbart recently, Alan Bakari put out an article that indicated that that's not the case. That indeed there is no consistency, that Louis Farrakhan still has his website, that Antifa and it's going down, and all these sites that advocate violence and violate the rules and the procedures of these companies are not banned. So it's very clear that they're not acting in a consistent way, and they're not guided by a consistent rule of law. There's no consistent process. No, they have terms and principles, but there's no process to ensure that they are obeyed in any given circumstance. It's ultimately arbitrary to determine whether or not they're lawful. Like, think about the importance of our court system. It's not just that there's laws, substantive laws that you can violate that makes our court system important. There are rules of procedure. In our courts, there are rules of procedure. There are rules of litigation that you have to go through, and there is appellate procedure. There's rules about procedure, and there's no rules about procedure guiding these progressives. There's no rules about procedure guiding when rules will be enforced. If that's true, then that's a problem, because what it means is whoever has the loudest voice, whoever the people who are in charge of, can decide to initiate process. So today I tweeted, I said, quote, if you are a conservative and you aren't for regulating big tech, you're wrong. We need to start thinking like Teddy Roosevelt. These are enormously powerful companies that are effectively exercising sovereign power. And so they need to be regulated. And the way we should do that is something we need to puzzle out as like a movement and thinkers over the next weeks and months. But the goal should be hashtag regulate big tech. It must be regulated and it must be done. And there are people who say to me, Will, but what about regulatory capture? What about the fact that these companies might manipulate the regulations? And to that I say, that's non-unique. That's a way of saying that's the status quo. The status quo is that unelected progressives have the ability to delete you from the internet. And you're worried about what might happen if a government also had the power to delete you from the internet? That's the status quo. The difference is, who do you want to be sovereign over you? Do you want to have democratic control of your sovereign, or do you want to be at the mercy of an SJW tech CEO? Right? We were relying on the discipline of the market in this case, but the market is not effectively disciplining these companies. They are natural monopolies, and they are behaving in a way that is monopolistic. They're just using their monopoly power in a way that is different than historically we have thought about the risks of monopoly power. We've thought about the risks of monopoly power in the context of being able to extract monopoly profits. That's not what happens. The real risks of monopoly power is that the people running these companies are capable of using their technology in order to ensure, and their power to influence political outcomes. That's what they're doing. And so from my perspective, it's clearly time to regulate big tech. That, moreover, if you're a conservative and you are against regulating big tech, you are effectively committing political suicide. You are letting your principles essentially force you into a position where you are going to lose. That is insufficiently ruthless. That is weakness. You cannot allow, if your principles mean that you lose, your principles are no good. Somebody says I should use my Q powers to handle it. Well, we'll see. Perhaps I'll post some things in the Q forum and talk about, Facebook, Google, big tech must push, regulate, something like that. It's hashtag Q, and that'll do something like that. But the fundamental point here is that if you are opposed to regulation of big tech, then you are for losing. As a Republican, as a conservative, you're for losing, because imagine they're doing this with Trump in power. Imagine what they'll do with a friendly administration. Like, think about that. What happens if Kamala Harris is president, the Democrats are in control of Congress? What limits do you feel that these big tech companies will obey? Anybody? What limits do you think they will feel? My answer is not very many. I don't think they'll feel limited by particularly much at all. I think they'll be even more aggressive about shutting down conservative speech. I think they'll realize that there's no way that the government will get in their way, and they'll fully go forward. It's the only thing that is currently restraining these big tech companies from being more aggressive than they are is the fact that Republicans currently run the government. But that's not enough, right? That's one type of sovereignty. And in the world of modern technology, the sovereignty of the government is competing, in effect, with the sovereignty of these private companies. That needs to end. The private companies need to be brought, these specific private companies need to be brought under the sway of the government, because they are functionally exercising sovereign power by deleting people from the internet, by controlling their fundamental right to speech, right? It's remarkable. These are natural monopolies that control the public square of American democracy. And again, remember Teddy Roosevelt. People will say, oh, this is not a conservative position. Well, it was Teddy Roosevelt's position. Was Teddy Roosevelt a Republican? I think so. And Teddy Roosevelt was confronting something far less serious than what we are confronting. Somebody says campaign finance. The funny thing is, the campaign finance issue has been settled by the Supreme Court in the sense that, basically it's going to be unregulated as protected speech. That said, if that were actually an option, I would be perfectly for in putting in place campaign finance restrictions at this point. You know why? As long as we had equal access to social media, because I feel like the Democrats need campaign finance more than we do, because we're better at social media. But that doesn't do anything if you lose control of the social media networks that are relevant and that are imposing this kind of control on people. Somebody says shadow banning has to be a campaign violation, right? One would think, but I'm not an expert in that area of law, so I don't want to speculate. I think that Matt Gaetz has a case when he goes to the Federal Election Commission, but I'm not certain. So we've reached the end of the substantive point. We need to regulate big tech, the exact nature of that regulation to ensure that they obey, ordinary standard processes, and that they do not throttle conservatives anymore. That's really important. What realm of law am I an expert in? I know a decent amount about class action litigation and defamation litigation. Alex Jones, somebody asked, Alex Jones was on for 10 years. What made them ban him so suddenly? The answer to that question, I think, is pretty clearly the fact that Apple decided to pull the trigger and then everybody else decided to pull the trigger at once, whether or not they colluded, but it was a pressure campaign. So we can't, that's not orderly procedure, right? Like, imagine if we had a court system that operated by whoever the prosecutors were pressured to prosecute, that's who got prosecuted. Not a systematic idea of, a law violation and then a prosecution. It's totally arbitrary. It's one thing to have a set of substantive rules, but the substantive rules are not going to be fair if there isn't a similar set of procedural rules that are consistently obeyed. And in this case, there are no consistent procedural rules that govern the imposition of penalties by these companies when they are exercising what is effectively sovereign power over individual speech. Right? Like, you're telling me that deleting somebody from the internet that isn't a quasi-sovereign power, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it seems obvious to me that is a power that it comes extraordinarily close to the sovereign power over individual speech. Somebody says, if Trump can't block people, doesn't it make social media a legal way to communicate with reps? One would think that's another good angle that could be interesting. I'm not sure whether that works for First Amendment claims, though, because I don't know that, again, this is a tricky area of First Amendment law when it comes to suing private companies for First Amendment violations, because those private companies are not the government, and the First Amendment, by its terms, only protects state action. How do people like David Duke not get banned? A very fair question. But yeah, so we need to be looking at antitrust. We need to be looking at common carrier regulation. We need to be looking at a lot of different ways in which to deal with the fact that these companies are acting like sovereigns and they're managed by SJWs. These are public utilities. Can Infowars sue them? I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm sure they can afford the lawyers to figure that out. Jim Acosta agrees. Well, that's good. The question, I don't even know if it's illegal or not. I just know it should be, right? Like, it absolutely should be illegal, right? I'm getting to the point where it's like, and people have pointed out, it's like, well, Will, you were happy when some people got banned. It's like, yeah, because I didn't like them, right? Like, you ban some all-read people. I'm like, yeah, that's fine with bad things happening to people I don't like. That doesn't change. And even then, I said, basically, I was like, there's a compelling argument that nobody should be able to do this, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to take satisfaction in bad things happening to people I dislike. Imagine this is happening in a physical public space. Well, the analog in public space is imprisonment. It's physical imprisonment, right? You are being denied, functionally denied access to the thing that networks us all together. Because it's privately owned, they feel they have the right to do that. And they probably do under current law. I think probably the law needs to be changed. What should Ben Shapiro do? Retire. Exactly. Alex Jones is still going. That's fine. I mean, honestly, I don't really want to listen to Alex Jones talk about this because Alex is kind of crazy, But that said, I think he needs to have the right to speech. I think it's extraordinarily scary that he was deleted from the internet. And I think Michael Tracy had a really good point. I mean, what this is, it's remarkable about how the progressive left used to be so petrified about concentrated sovereign power, right? Petrified of it, scared shitless of concentrated corporate power. Said it was the one thing that we needed democratic control to fight against. And now, because the concentrated corporate power in the modern world is wielded by leftists running big tech companies, they couldn't care less about concentrated corporate power. They love it. It's their favorite thing. And they appeal to it to do what they want. Now, as Republicans, we need to realize, if we just go along with that, we're going to get owned. Because what they're using the concentrated corporate power for is not to exploit any particular people. It's not to make monopoly profits, which were the usual concerns. It's to shut us up and make us lose elections. Y'all want to keep losing elections or no? Right? Do you guys just want to be a permanent political minority, marginalized permanently? I don't. Right? But if y'all Republicans are going to be like, oh, free speech, they're a private company, can't do anything about it. Basically what you're saying is you want to be in the political wilderness. You are functionally a Democrat if you're not for regulating big tech. Being a conservative in 2018 means you're for regulating big tech. If you're not for regulating big tech, you're not a conservative, you're a Democrat. Because what you're saying is the power of sovereignty should reside in the hands of Democrats. So you're a Democrat. Right? No more of this stuff. I'm tired of it. You are not a conservative if you don't support big tech regulation in 2018. You are a Democrat. That's the word for conservatives who don't support big tech regulation. Democrats. Right? Tell me why I'm wrong. You're a conservative who doesn't support big tech regulation. Why are you not a Democrat? Yeah, no, that's the way to think about it. I'm going to tweet that out a bit. Please don't steal it from me. There's a word for conservatives who don't support big tech regulation in 2018. Democrats. And people say, oh, well, a competitor could do it, like Gab. Nah. I mean, this is a natural monopoly. Gab is a ghost town. Nobody's on it. The idea that another company could replace the massive network that Twitter already has. Twitter's where everybody's speaking. It's where everybody's going to keep speaking regardless of one or two individuals being banned off the platform. That's not how it works, right? Like, it's a natural monopoly. Facebook is a natural monopoly for its family and friends social network. Twitter is a natural monopoly for public square social networking. YouTube is a natural. I mean, these are natural monopolies. And the idea that they don't exist, I don't have patience for that silly libertarian stuff. Your principles will just get us owned, right? Like, your principles will lead to leftists owning everything and destroying you. Not interested. Somebody says, when the stock market collapses, so will Twitter. People cannot. I don't agree with that, and I think it's a really silly thing to hope for. Not to go after you, P-Traps, but I really think it's important to realize Twitter is a fucking monopoly, and nobody knows exactly what it's worth, but it isn't going anywhere, right? Clearly, it's an asset that can generate revenue and that nobody can meaningfully compete with at what it does. Nobody can meaningfully compete with Twitter at being the public square social media network that everybody is addicted to, right? What did Twitter? Public square social media communication, right? The idea is that every person relevant to modern politics, nearly everyone, is on Twitter arguing with each other. The news media looks to Twitter as a source of what the news is. And so Twitter is just unbelievably important, right? Part of me thinks that, like, as a company, Twitter is an insanely valuable company and is probably being undervalued right now, right? Like, probably, I suspect that at the end of the day, we will realize that this is probably a $500 billion company because it just can't go anywhere, right? Like, it won't go broke, it won't go out of business, and it will continue to be the monopoly unless it goes through unbelievably disastrous mismanagement, which is why it needs to be regulated, right? If people are expecting it to be outcompeted or go bankrupt or something, they're just wrong. It's not going to happen. Twitter is where it's at. Somebody says, regulate big tech. Who regulated Alex Jones? Precisely. The question is, who do you want to be the sovereign, right? Do you want Jack Dorsey to be your sovereign, or do you want Donald Trump to be your sovereign? How is this even hard? Right? You have two choices. You have Jack Dorsey on the one hand and Donald Trump as your sovereign. Right now. Right? Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook, those can be your sovereigns if you want. You can just let them be your sovereigns. Or you can have Trump be your sovereign. Right? Where are the class action lawsuits? I mean, there's potential antitrust, but it's hard, right? Like, part of the problem is current law isn't really equipped to deal with this. This is a new problem. And antitrust law probably needs to be tweaked in order to deal with this, and there needs to be regulatory agencies and stuff like that. Like, you need new law and you need a new regulatory agency to guard against a particular problem that's been identified. Somebody says Robert Barnes is doing right now. I hope he wins. I just, my suspicion is that we need new law, right? I mean, I haven't looked at the matter deeply enough to say we don't need new law, or we for sure need new law. Somebody says Elon Musk will save us. No, Elon Musk's company is going bankrupt. Lawsuit going to discovery is good, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We'll see. Free speech needs protection even in a defense, right? And the core free speech battleground is now in these social media networks, right? I mean, this is the effect of the modern public square. It's the modern Hyde Park. It's the modern speaker's corner. And if you can't speak on social media, like, your voice has been throttled. Your voice has been silenced. Morning Joe will not save us. That's for sure. And I think the conservatives are aware of it. Like Kevin McCarthy's, the shadow banning stuff, they got a little too aggressive with that. They really woke up a lot of conservatives to the potential problem by banning politicians, right? I can't believe they were that sloppy. So sloppy. Imagine, you could have totally gotten away with it if you had just shadow banned, like, the MAGA grassroots right, because the conservatives in Congress generally only pay a little bit of attention to that. But you shadow banned Ronna McDaniel, you shadow banned Matt Gaetz, you shadow banned David Nunes, you shadow banned politicians, sitting representatives. Like, it's a bad move. Somebody says, Twitter is not the government. They completely violate your free speech. You know what I call that person? A Democrat. That's a Democrat. When anybody who comes back here and says to me, well, they're a private company, well, they can do what they want, you're a Democrat. I'm sorry. I'm tired of hearing it. Democrats can talk about how they're a private company and they can do what they want. Republicans are going to ensure that Republicans don't lose every election from now on as a result of their speech being throttled. Am I for net neutrality? Net neutrality is trivial in comparison to this. Actually, I would use net neutrality as a weapon, essentially basically saying the only circumstance in which you'll get net neutrality is if you provide content neutrality. Right? Right? You don't actually treat people neutrally on your platform, so why should we force internet providers to treat your bandwidth neutrally? I'm a Democrat? No. I'm a Republican, because I believe we should regulate big tech. Being a conservative in 2018 means regulating big tech. If you're not for regulating big tech in 2018, you're a Democrat. Because you want Democrats to win. That's the only, I mean, that's the logical conclusion of your argument at this point. Big tech controls the public square. Big tech is run by progressives, and they're using it to silence conservatives. So you don't want big tech regulation? That means you want Democrats to control the public square and exercise sovereign power over it. You're a Democrat. Right, somebody says big tech won't be regulated by politicians, sadly. Well, then we'll call them Democrats too. We have the power to make politicians do what we want. We do. On our side, at least. We're pretty powerful here. That's what social media is. It's influence. How I would regulate? I just came up, I just decided that this was like plank one of the platform, right? This is aspirational. The details of how to regulate it, let's get policy wonks on it. We'll figure out exactly what needs to happen. But that's not my, common carrier might work, making political identity like a civil right, basically like making a protected class rather, so you can't discriminate. There's like a variety of options that come off the top of my head, but I don't want to say any of them is the best idea. They'd have to be looked at, and we need policy wonks on this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can't Trump do anything about big tech now? I mean, I don't know exactly what he can do. Why does Twitter need to be regulated? You're getting annoying. That's been the entire Periscope, because they are exercising sovereign power, and if left alone, will ensure that conservatives can't win elections. Brian Kemp didn't show in Twitter search. Another example. Yeah, Tucker and Hannity certainly will, I think. I think Tucker will. Tucker knows what's at stake. He's on it. Tucker's the man. Reddit linked you here. Interesting. Fascinating. That's good. It's good to hear that I'm getting on Reddit. Yeah, you're asking questions, but you could figure out the answer to them by going earlier in the Periscope. And I feel like you're asking questions that are forcing me to repeat myself. That's why I'm getting annoyed. All right, I think we've made our point. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed, follow me at willchamberlain on Twitter, And again, remember, if you are not for regulating big tech in 2018, you are a progressive. Peace out.